These days, Christians can be seen as anti-culture. But is there another way? A terrorist plot was foiled at a recent Taylor Swift concert in Vienna. And why are video game movies so bad most of the time? And if you love sequels and live-action remakes, Disney has got you covered. All that and more on this week's episode of Faith and Pop Culture.
Hey, well, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to episode number 23 of the Faith and Pop Culture Podcast. It is me, your host, Daniel, and I am joined at the desk, as I always am, by the Snoop Dogg to my Paris Olympics, Mr. Samuel David Kemp. What is up?
Not too much, Daniel. Good to be with you. I've entered the hat phase of my haircut cycle, and there's not much I can do with it at this point, and so I just don a hat.
Well, you've seen I live in the hat phase, regardless of my haircut cycle.
And it's only the same hat every time.
See, when you find a perfect hat, it's like finding the perfect woman. Like you get married to that, and there's a synergy there, and you grow in the relationship. And especially when it's a hat like this that you find for like $7 in a clearance table.
Well, this was also a secondhand find when we were in Canada, so I'm pretty proud of it.
So there's this thing beautiful about passing on the legacy of the hat. But we're excited to have you guys join us again. If you've been tuning in for the last couple weeks, you know we've been dipping our toes in the old Olympic swimming pool. We've enjoyed it. There is
we've been swimming some laps in the Olympic drama.
That post-Olympic depression has already kind of set in.
Yeah, it has.
You know, you have to do other things. Like, you know, me and my family, we sat at the table and ate dinner together as a family.
For the first time in 2 weeks last night, or whenever it was.
Like a healthy family watching.
I know, we like our family is the exact same way. So it's like, but like the Christmas season, I do feel like there is a time where it's like, okay, like I am sad. I love the Olympics, but you got to move on with your life.
Especially when you find yourself watching like the breakdancing. I don't know if you watched that.
We did.
Maybe I'm done with the Olympics now.
maybe we should call it quits.
Maybe the magic has worn off.
I don't know. Ray Gunn, man, she's got the moves.
It inspired someone. Even someone like me could maybe make a run.
There is hope
at Los Angeles. And kind of this will be our last story that is adjacent, I guess, to the, for those of you that are tired of us talking about the Olympics.
We're milking that Olympic cow for all she's worth.
But there was something that sort of, I call it adjacent, because it's birthed out of the Olympics. But I think it's more reflecting to me like a wider trend of just something that I've seen so much lately. And just, it grinds my gears a little bit. Like there's something about this. I have thoughts. So
do tell.
To share those thoughts, what kind of inspired this? I call it a tale of two tweets. Although I don't know if we
every good story starts with a tale of two tweets.
So I was scrolling through my feed, mindlessly procrastinating work or whatever I was supposed to be doing, and there were two of these posts like back to back that were like kind of related both to the Olympics, but I could not be more polarized. Kind of the first one, there was some post about how amazing it is, the Olympics and athletes and yay humanity and all that stuff, and kind of like the response to that, there was some guy,
Lloyd legalist or whoever
was just shared their 2 cents about hey, well, it's a bunch of just the Olympics are just sort of this vehicle for a bunch of terrible woke ideology propaganda. No real Christian or conservative would even waste any of their time watching that.
I love that,
which I guess exposes us as apparently we are
fake.
So I kind of saw that like, that's one take to this inspirational post of
and boy is it a take.
Yeah, that might be inspirational, but God have mercy on your soul if you spent any time tuning into the Olympics. And kind of right after that tweet, like the next one down was a tweet about an Olympic U.S. hurdler kind of sharing her own, from the podium after an epic victory, like professing her faith. And it's sort of a tweet like, hey, celebrating her as an athlete and also as, as a Christian, as someone that's, shining a light into the culture. And just sort of those two tweets in many ways, even outside of just the framework of the Olympics, like that embodies, I think, just these two kind of cultural approaches within the church towards culture. You have, and we'll get into the second one, like the Olympic hurdler. But I think the first kind of response to me is what usually call like anti-culture Christianity. Like,
Yeah.
it's sort of this approach, this posture that is like the default is it's all terrible. Like it's just a bunch of garbage. It's just it's this very ungodly. And as Christians, not only do we need to criticize it, but like you need to be like actively hate it. Like you need to be against it. You need to boycott it. You need to share your opinion any chance you get. And even if chances you don't get, you need to worm your way in there and make sure people know just how bad it is. And I feel like there's stuff to get into with that. But what are some of your have you am I?
No, I don't think you're off base there at all, because it's the fork in the road, I think, of the Christian approach to culture, broader culture perhaps. And I do think and especially I think it was brought into like sharp relief over the Olympic Games, and obviously the opening ceremony, and had a lot of feathers ruffled. And so you see so much of, and we've talked about this a lot, but you see a lot of Christians taking the approach that I guess we will sort of criticize the world into belief or something. And then the other is we're going to be the best, whatever we are, for the glory of God. And it could not be a greater contrast, because you see how, and there's been several athletes that have really spoken out about their faith in just very loving and respectful ways. And I think that person and that witness is going to do far more for the kingdom of God than any sort of hot take and criticization of Olympic ceremonies, or just whatever you perceive as anti-Christian and you feel the need to attack. Like that does nothing, I don't think, to promote faith or to be a witness that God has called us to be.
Yeah, because it's almost like, I think like you were saying, like it's this mindset of like addition by subtraction. Like if we can just demolish all of that's in culture, like in the rubble somewhere, we're going to be left with the kingdom of God. If we just get enough of this other stuff out of the way, clear, in the ashes we'll have, like, rather than like the addition by addition, like by actually sharing something new, contributing, like entering into the culture. And it's kind of this like, at least to me, like there's just something that very reminiscent about like even just like the Pharisees in the Bible with this approach. Like, I think we, if you go to Sunday school, we often, like, they're just the punching bags. We all hate the Pharisees, and these are a bunch of blind Pharisees. How do they not see? Like, and then if we go home on Monday and we act like the Pharisees, like this sort of standing back, this condemning everything, very kind of legalistic about just
that's not true Christianity.
Yeah, like that's this. I have people every couple of reviews almost like like if you even if you don't like the movie, if you even like review it, then like you're obviously need Jesus. Like
questioning
this
faith,
idea of like that faith doesn't just depend on a relationship with Jesus and his the salvation from that, but like it also depends on not watching this movie and not supporting this Olympic ceremony and not doing this,
boycotting that,
boycotting this, and not eating from this corporation that has products whose CEO said something that we like. That there's there's all these other things, and it just becomes this. And I think there's something like contagious and I think like addictive about that like anti-culture approach, where you get fixated on just the negative all the time. And like we're very, as Christians, sometimes like our calling is to be against culture, and we just need to put down culture, which is, if you read scripture, like that is not the approach you get really anywhere in scripture. Like not that Jesus or the disciples or biblical authors like didn't have things to say about culture.
I mean, there were certainly confrontations all throughout scripture, but it was never this like negative worldview, essentially, like that everything is bad and we must like tear down everything that we see that we disagree with.
Yeah, because even like the Jesus's kind of last prayer for his disciples before he ascends to heaven in John 17:15, where he says, "My prayer is not that you take them out of the world, but that you protect them from the evil one. They are not of the world, even as I am not of the world." Which is where you get sort of like the Sunday school slogan of like, you got to be in the world, but not of it. Which again, it's a cliche in some ways, but like, it's also, I think, profound truth from Jesus. Like,
and a truth that I think many people are struggling to
like understand, like, what does it
understand
mean
and
to be?
apply.
Because if you look at it, because later, if you read through that prayer, he says, like, just as I am, he's like, follow my example of how I navigated that. And if you think of how Jesus navigated that, like, he literally stepped like out of his, out of heaven into the culture, like, into the world, to engage and to offer like a new way of life. Not just to go like protest and
Yeah.
It wasn't some like revolutionary. It was overthrow the evil pagan Roman Empire. Like, gather with me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm gonna walk through a bunch of fields in the countryside and just like tell people good news about stuff. Like,
Well, and it's a calling to something, not a calling against something. And I think that's like sort of the fundamental difference with this sort of anti-culture movement that we see in Christianity today, is that is, I think, fundamentally an empty and sort of lifeless pursuit, because at the end of that, like, all you have is like rubble and ashes, and so you get what you want, and you're left with essentially nothing, because you're not calling people out of where they are to something better. You're just saying, let's go tear down what already exists. And I think, I think Christians who have that approach would be very upset, but you can compare them to sort of the more like radical left-wing communist sides of culture and say, like, so like that's essentially what you're trying to do here, is just tear down the existing structures to build what? And I think, sadly, many Christians don't think past, well, once we tear this down, we're going to be like loving and kind and show them how Jesus loves them. It's like, well, no, because you're not doing that in the process. So like, you're not going to magically get everything that you want and tear down all the woke propaganda to then turn around and be like this loving, joy-filled person.
well, I think it's just easier too. Like,
Yeah.
it takes nothing to go on social media and just rail against the ideologies and culture,
Yeah.
and like just to be mad, or to, it doesn't cost anyone, to like except for yourself, to like boycott the Olympics because you're mad, or to like criticize. Like, it does cost you something to go and like love the people that are difficult to love, and to like share the good news. And I think, but like you said, like, I think Christians need to be known more for like what they stand for than what they stand against. Like,
Yeah.
I think that is the calling of Jesus. Like, we're called to follow Jesus. We're not called to like be against the culture or fight the cultural battles. And I think like, an example of that is it was Sydney Gloffin Levoin, who, again, she's the U.S. hurdler runner. She competed in several events, and I feel like her testimony throughout this Olympics was just such a stark contrast. Like, not only of just how different those two approaches are, but like how much more effective and like beautiful and good her approach is.
Yeah.
In contrast to just the endless, vomiting of angry opinions, to about the culture. So she crushed it at the. Like,
Oh, yeah.
Not only did she like do well and like win multiple gold medals, but like she like won gold medals. Like, if you like, even like the camera, like, it zooms in and it's her, and then like empty track, and then it like pans over to the other best athlete runners in the entire world, and she's just like way ahead of them. Like, it's, so she won the hurdles, the 400-meter hurdles, and set a world record in the process. And then she was also I think ran the fastest lap or whatever in the 4x400 meter relay. But sort of what sort of has popped and sort of made some headlines was kind of after winning the 400-meter hurdles, she was given like a press conference with the bronze and the silver medalists, and I forget sort of how it came up, but one of the journalists sort of perceived, like, say, hey, correct me if I'm wrong, sorry, but like, it seemed like you're alluding to faith or something in, can you speak to that? And she made this response. She said, I credit all that I do to God. He's given me a gift, and he's given me a drive to just want to continue to improve upon myself. And I have a platform, and I want to use it to glorify him. So whenever I step on the track, it's always the prayer of, God, let me be a vessel in which you are glorified. Whatever the result is, how I conduct myself, how I carry myself, not just how I perform. So it's just freedom in knowing that regardless of what happens, he's going to get the praise through me. That's why I do what I do. And it's just a great, an off-the-cuff answer. I think it's well spoken, and you can see like even like she has a pin. I think right now at least like on her Instagram, like her pin post is a post like with her an American flag, kind of like a thinking back on over the Olympics, and very much like I do this, results and stuff are temporary. Kingdom of God. That's what I'm called to do. But it's just such a stark contrast. Like here's this there's someone that is carrying herself well. She's participating in the Olympics, like, within the cultural moment, not just sort of criticizing it from the outside, and then using that to, to just share her faith in a very authentic, unscripted, relational way. But what are your...
Yeah, I would say more of that, please. Like that, like I think that's great. Like, and I think it's a great example of how just one individual can make an impact in what they do. And not only, I mean, it would be different if she was maybe dead last, or if, she didn't do as well as she did. But I think you have both of those things. Like she is extremely dedicated and has risen to the best in her field. And as a result of that, she has a greater opportunity to be herself and to shine the light of Christ everywhere she goes. And you do get the sense that whether or not, she came in last or first, like this would still be her response. And I think that's incredible. And what's interesting to me is the same people who were like, boycotting the Olympics and just decrying the opening ceremony and all the sort of like hate that the Olympics got at the beginning, probably almost everyone that I saw, like, a week later, they were all like posting her response and like, oh, isn't this amazing? And like, good for her. And like, that we need more of this. And it's like, yeah, how we get more of that is by encouraging that, not by like boycotting the very thing that she's trying to do. And I know that like a lot of people would never say, well, we like the events, we didn't like the ceremony or whatever. But it's like you can't really, out of the same mouth, I don't think, say what you say at the beginning of the Olympics and then try and be like, oh, look, a Christian doing amazing Christian things and also being really good at what she does. Like, isn't this great? We need more of this. It's like, well, you just spent like the last week telling us all how like terrible the Olympics are and how you're not watching 1 minute of it. And then this happens. And so it's funny to me, the response to her, but I just think I think good for her. And it's just encouraging to see someone who's just representing Christ so well.
Yeah, and very much just an example of like she is in the culture. Like she's in, she's like you said, she's disciplined. Like she's, she's not just like stepping in like some artificial way to like, the sign on the side of the Olympics, to like she's very much like immersed. And again, she would have things I'm sure she didn't agree with, as anyone would with all the countries, from around the world.
Yeah.
And there's big ceremony. Like there's going to be different ideologies and worldviews and stuff, different personalities and stuff. Like, and like, not that we don't say, hey, that's wrong, or hey, that doesn't line up with the Bible. But like that, we don't stop there. Like, we actually step into the culture and have the opportunities for things like this, which I think just gives such a better picture. I think more effective, for the kingdom than just making sure people got one more angry comment about.
Well, and I think it also just lends credibility to whatever it is that person has to say. So if you go and you compete and you do very well, you earn some credibility or some cultural credit or whatever to then sort of speak your mind about whatever it is. And I think people listen to that rather than if you're just, trying to pull some sort of stunt to, I don't know, paint a fish on something, or I don't know, like try and do something that's sort of adjacent to what your main thing is, but you're like trying to make it about God in some inauthentic way. Like, I don't have an example of that.
But even I think, even in some way, like maybe it's slightly adjacent to it, but like even like with Here at the Collision, like with our movies and stuff, like there are movies that I wouldn't on my own if I wasn't doing some of this, like probably wouldn't go see. But I want to join those conversations and like not just sort of criticize, Hollywood today is, I haven't watched a movie since, Empire Strikes Back was in theaters, but I know Hollywood today is just, this is
I don't
terrible.
need to.
Yeah, I know enough. I've seen, but rather like, hey, actually being present, again, there's still obviously boundaries in movies and things I won't go see, and like all those things are still in place, but just being present so that you can have those conversations and some of that credibility. So hey, all power to her. I think she's like 27, so I don't know. She might be around for the next Olympics.
Maybe LA.
But who knows? I think maybe her influence will also just inspire others to kind of follow.
Yeah,
after.
I mean, she's the sort of athlete that I would want my $2 to look up to and say, yeah, like you can follow her example, and I think that's a really cool thing to see as a parent.
Yeah, but maybe one woman that maybe you don't want your daughter to mimic or follow after is sort of the next story. And again, we don't want to make light of it because that she is quite.
It is rather serious.
It is a rather serious topic, but that is all T Swift. Hashtag Swifties here at the table. So this is a bizarre that almost kind of got lost in the shuffle because
which I didn't even see it
because like the Olympics and stuff. And again, there's not a whole lot to necessarily to dig into with it, but it's definitely a very notable pop cultural event. And that is that there was an attempted, or at least a hoped for, like terrorist attack at a Taylor Swift concert. So she was just performing. She's doing like a UK tour, and she was in Austria and Vienna, where she was going to do 3 shows with an estimated of like 200,000 people. Like people are like traveling like across like the world to go to those people like maybe can't come to America when she's doing those tours. And before she did the first concert, it was they canceled it because there was some teenagers that were uncovered by the cops that seemed to be inspired by ISIS that had planned to go into the theater. They had essentially a suicide bombing like, to try and do it in the concert venue, and so they canceled that concert, canceled the next couple concerts. And I'm not sure again whenever this episode airs like if she's continued her tour yet. Like they're still working through obviously taking that very serious, but like whoa, like that's a big, like the biggest pop, that would be a big story anyways, but like the biggest pop star in the world like gets a missed terrorist attack. Like I don't think you'd even.
No, I hadn't even heard about it until you mentioned it, but that is huge, and I think it's I think it's easy to sort of forget that there are, for all the flaws of Western values and ideology, and there's so much sort of culture bashing of the West. It sure beats the alternative, I think, and I think this is a great example of sort of that, the ideologies of what ISIS stand for coming into confrontation with, I'm sure, what they perceive as like evil Western values.
Because that was one of the things that stood out to me is just sort of the, that this isn't like a battle of army. Again, it's not like a military. I guess it seems like these people are operating on their own, but it is sort of this kind of lashing out, this battle against like culture, like against Taylor Swift, whatever you think about her, like very much represent, like she's sort of represents a lot of sort of the West and like pop culture and like her songs, and she's super famous, and that it just sort of shows how, I guess, like how intertwined sort of cultural stuff is with what it means to like to be the West or to be America or to be whatever else which is, I mean, I think you even see that in America. Like, that's why there's so much criticism towards like Disney and Netflix and stuff more than like atheist college professors. Like, the culture very much is sort of the way that's shaping things and like represents things, and you just sort of see it in a crazy story like this, whereas it's like trying to take out this artist, not just like politician or something.
No, not a politician, not a military base, none of that. It's like, let's go for the pop star that is the sort of embodiment of Western values. And I mean, I think that's no mistake on their part. But it is just a reminder that not everyone in the world shares those values, and as flawed as they are, I still think it's sort of the best we have, and we can disagree with how those work out into culture, and that's most of what we do here on the podcast. But I'm still thankful for that sort of bedrock of Western values and operating inside of that versus whatever the alternative might be.
Yeah, and obviously, thank God that this was foiled, and pray that for safety for that. But like you said, not everyone has shared values. But I think one of the things that does unite people, really across all spectrums,
speaking of
whether
foiled,
it's cultural or religious or whatever it might be, is the fact that the new Borderlands movie is just not a good movie. So kind of another maybe less serious, but story is this. If you guys tuned in last week, like I wasn't sure about this Borderlands movie. It's based on a video game. I've never played the video game. It seems to be real popular. It looks fun. I want to watch like the trailers of the game. Like, I think it's won like Game of the Year. Like it's a big game. The movie doesn't look good, and it turns out that
it wasn't good.
my intuition steered me right, because this movie, I honestly can't remember a movie. I mean, like I've been reviewing movies like every week for like several years. Like I can't remember a movie that I was as bored in and like as eager just for it to be done. Like I don't know how many times I kept like trying to do the math of like, okay, it started at this time, the runtime's this, the trailers went on for this long, like how many more minutes until this movie is over so I can finally get out of here. And it turns out, hey,
you were not alone.
Yeah, a lot of people, I like to think of myself as spearheading it and people following after me.
Yeah.
And kind of coming in line with their opinions, because hey, this movie, as of at least right now, has a 9% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. And honestly, it's shocking that it got that high. I don't know who those 9% of people are, but I guess to each their own. And like 50% audience score. So this is not a case of like, well, this is for the fans. The fans liked it.
Yeah.
Like, no,
nobody liked it.
Nobody liked it. It got a D+ cinema score, which is not good at all. And it just made no money. It had $8.8 million on the opening weekend with a budget of 110 to 120, plus probably another 15 million for like the marketing campaign, which I'm not a math guy or even a business guy. I'm a cultural guy. But I can tell that that's not good math. If you're
yeah, that's what you would call an epic failure, I think, in the industry.
And it's
or maybe a bomb,
which has become the norm. So this is sort of where I wanted us to just briefly just ask the question of like, why are video game movies always so bad? Like because this is not like some we're all shocked that this video game movie didn't do well, because they never do well. I was digging into it a little bit, and it's, again, Rotten Tomatoes. It has its flaws as a metric system, but it's still good for like the overall kind of sweeping picture. And as far as I could find, only 2 movies based on video games have ever scored above 70% on Rotten Tomatoes. One was the movie Werewolves Within in 2021, which never heard of the movie, never heard of the game, and then the other one was the Angry Birds movie 2 in 2019, which is
telling.
Again, if you've never read my review for that movie, it's probably the funniest review I've ever done for. I had thoughts. That was probably the least professional I've ever been in my reviews. Not a good movie, and that's like the gold standard.
Yeah, we can maybe link that epic review.
Oh man, what a movie! And some of it, I think critics are just wrong. Like the Super Mario Brothers movie I thought was really good. It's like 50%. It's like hey, this is going by what the critics said. At least, and like, there have been some success, like the show Fallout on Amazon, and then The Last of Us on HBO, based on video games. Both did well, where other ones like Halo, classic game, didn't do well, got canceled after like 2 seasons. So what are your thoughts, Sam? Because this, obviously, if there was an easy answer to it, then we'd have good video game movies, because someone would have figured that out. But like, what is it? Like, why, with all the money at their disposal, all this like glorious IP, all the nostalgia, the built-in fans,
and built-in storylines too.
Like why? What is it about video games that just haven't been able to translate into?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure there's lots of reasons why, but I feel like one is the again, I don't know how these get made exactly, but I would imagine the people at the video game property having differences of opinion with the people in the movie making side of it, and I feel like probably a lot of this gets sort of neutered by committee, if you will, and so there may be some great stories and some great premises to begin with, but by the time it like passes through all the hands at the studio and then at the video game company, again, I don't know how all that works out, but I imagine there's some veto power on both sides, and I don't know, maybe that's part of like art can't be really made by committee, and
because you can usually tell, like, again, if you've never noticed this, look for it next time you go to a movie theater, like, because they always show Sony, like the opening, like the companies, and like some of these movies, like, it just goes on and on. Like, it's, by Sony and Bad Robot and 5-Star Productions and Legendary, like all these different places. Like, how many different companies were involved in making this hour and 40 minute movie?
I think if you see that, that's usually a sign that like this may not be your favorite film. And so I don't know. My guess is there's probably a lot that gets sort of quashed in that side of it, because there are so many competing interests and just so many interested parties that have power to veto stuff. And so I think probably a lot of the power of the story and of the cinematography and everything probably ends up on the chopping block.
Yeah, I do think sort of that corporate stuff, and it's not even just like, that there's other influences, but it's like influences by very big and powerful, video game, like that
It's
have
like,
a lot
you
of,
do this or this movie doesn't get made.
Yeah,
And
like
it's
where
like,
it just,
oh, okay, well,
so I think there is some of that. But I also just think there's got to be something to just the video games as a medium. And that's sort of where, like, as a Christian, why I think it is relevant of just, hey, does it really matter if video game movies do well or not? Like, I mean, if you're a Christian that loves video games, it does, but maybe not. But I think it does. I don't know. I think it's important to like discern like what is resonating with people. What is it like? What attracts them to video games but not to these movies? Like, what makes these games so compelling that we lose? Like, what are movies not doing? And I do think the obvious one is just the divide between a kind of active and passive.
yeah.
Like watching a movie, kind of passively watching this play out, is different than like, I got my little joystick and I'm the one fighting the bad guys. It's
Right.
It's a different experience than it is, and obviously, like, hey, people also watch other people play video game, and there's like, so not that
The whole esports thing is pretty big too.
like so there is like, I don't think it's as simplistic as that, but it does seem to like it's almost two audiences. Like, I think sometimes we sort of lump all of like pop culture and especially like video games and movies because they're sort of similar. They both tell stories like as sort of one thing, but it seems like clearly there's differences, and I think that should also inform us as Christians. Like, there's been a lot of attention lately to movies. Like, I mean, like us, we don't review video games. We do movies.
But we should.
We should do.
Let's be
I would
honest.
sign up for for work purposes. Logging some.
I may need to buy whatever the latest console is and just
for the sake of
drown endless hours
the kingdom of God
of reviews. Yeah. This is research.
But even like we also make Christian movies. Almost every month we're getting one or two faith.
Yeah.
We got another one coming out next week, but I know there sort of are video game, like Christian video games, but like they're not
very,
games that
very
people
few.
play.
Yeah.
they're not necessarily. They're still in the like. Maybe they're just straggling behind. Like, they're just.
I know there's some stuff in the works that seems rather interesting on sort of the, let's say, Christian video game side. But yeah, that they're not sort of cracking the code necessarily yet on the video game side. But I think it is interesting that just because there's a huge audience for this game, like those audiences do not correlate to fans of or attendees to its related movie, because I think people maybe are just not interested in seeing the movie version of the game that they love and play because they love and play the game. Like, why should they go?
So or if it's also different, like it doesn't live up to their.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm just not gonna. That's not my Borderlands or whatever it is.
Yeah, and I think it's also just the design of it is probably also totally different, because like video games, especially if it's like first person games, like they're designed to empower the player of the game, not this like rich character that you get to watch necessarily. And so even I think designing like how the main characters of a video game are, I would imagine is very different than like the main characters of a movie. It's just a totally different experience. I think.
And I just wonder if there's something to that for Christians, like to latch on to, because like video game movies, they stink. They're not doing well for the most part. Like video games have never been done better. Like they're, the game sale, like they make more money than like Hollywood does. Like, the video game industry is like the biggest, going entertainment thing. And like, it's like, but I feel like our approach to culture, we fall back on sort of the film mindset of like, it's more telling. Like we're going to have a story. It's very much sort of that, we're active, they're passive. Where I think we maybe miss out on the opportunities of it. Clearly, there's also this like yearning or this need to like be engaged, like actively participate in it. And like, the thing that makes video games so compelling for so many people, even as they, even as like the movie industry seems to like be tapering off more, like, how can we sort of like, direct our approach to culture and to people and like the gospel in a way that like appeals to those, innate desires, rather than just sort of the, the more traditional like tell them a story with a Christian theme in it.
Well, I think it's a huge untapped potential for Christians to be active in, and I think hopefully in the near future we'll start to see some of that, and I think I think there's a lot that could be done in that space that I think has been largely ignored by the Christian community.
Yeah, and I'd love to. I know we have some. We keep talking about how we're going to have some guests on here, and we're still working on that. It's just the technology and stuff. But I'd love to have some like Christian video game designers in, because I feel like there's so much to that. It's like how do you actually crack that code and use use video games in that way? Kind of last sort of, and we're not going to spend just a quick overview. Sort of story for us for this episode is that Disney, they had like their conference that they always have every year. And like they released, all the new trailers for their new properties. The internet was flooded with all this new Disney this, Disney that, and again some notable things like the new Star Wars show Skeleton Crew released its first trailer, first full trailer for Disney's Snow White live action, the first like teaser for the live action Lilo and Stitch, as well as sequels. You get a sequel, I get a sequel, everyone gets a sequel, because we got Toy Story 5. Frozen 3, Avatar Fire and Ash, which is Avatar 3, Incredibles 3, Zootopia 2. So a lot of things that, hey,
I'm sensing a
that
theme
thing that you liked, because you're about to get more of it. Without going through each one of these individually, what's your general consensus on? All right.
I don't know. Lack of originality is maybe the through line for Disney right now. I don't know. I mean, like I'm sure they are doing some original stuff. And like we did watch that they had a movie recently that had a limited release called Young Woman in the Sea, Daisy Ridley. Great. I thought a great movie, very inspiring. So they are doing some things, but yeah, it's just interesting that you look at this and it's all like, hey, we've got properties that make us a lot of money. Let's keep doing that. Like, let's keep just going back to the well that keeps providing for us. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think the Skeleton Crew looks kind of interesting, and I think that'll be fascinating to see how that.
Yeah, that's the most.
But everything else,
Star Wars show in a while, because it looks like almost like the Ewok movies back in the day. I could sort of kind of younger viewers about kids, but it's like Goonies, kind of E.T. Very Spielberg.
Very Spielberg.
Yeah, I don't know.
But I think aside from that, it's like, meh. Okay.
And the thing is, like, some of these will be good. Like, I think the first two Frozen movies, I'll admit. I think the second one's better than the first one.
Yeah.
Those are good. Zootopia I thought was good. I think all the Toy Story movies have been good. Like, even though we're this far in. But yeah, there is something like it's comforting to sort of like, hey, keep getting the thing that you like.
And I think that's
just miss out on something of like, but here's something new. Like here's something.
Well, I think probably Disney is the most risk averse studio. Would I don't know. Like, I'm just throwing that out there. Like,
they're
I have nothing
shy right now. Like,
I mean, and they've had some real bombs in sort of the Star Wars world, and so I think they're a little gun shy, and I think, I mean, honestly, I feel like Disney maybe has always been sort of like the feel good nostalgic studio.
Except for when they were making the things that we're nostalgic for, like
right.
I feel like when they started, it was very much like
which I think is very common. Like
here's Lion King which obviously was built on like other previous stories.
Sure,
like, it was new. Like some of these things that they were cutting edge. And now it's very much like, hey, here's a sequel to that, or it's that same thing but it's live action, or here's a spinoff, or here's Lion King but it's about Mufasa, and it's like. I don't know. Yeah, I feel like, they definitely have grown. Tim, hey, let us know if there's any of those things coming up for Disney that you are excited about. But speaking of things that are coming out and things that maybe are already out, the next segment of this podcast we have out now and coming soon. So as far as out now, the big one, I guess the most notable one is Borderlands.
The unfortunate one.
Hey, I've heard even some people in our review, our commenters have said, hey, they actually enjoyed it. So all power to them.
Yeah.
Don't know why. Don't see what they're seeing. But hey, I'm always...
It just shows you that, we're all different and we're all uniquely made.
But again, and I always go to every movie. Like, I'm always rooting for a movie. Like, and I'm always happy when other people enjoy things I don't enjoy.
Yeah.
I just very much did not enjoy this one. So hey, if you really want to go see it, maybe you'll enjoy it more than I did, but if you're on the fence, maybe wait for it to come on streaming fairly soon. As far as things that are kind of coming out this week, two movies that are coming out, which we'll have reviews for both. The first is the movie My Penguin Friend, which comes out this week, based on a true story about an old guy, lonely guy that finds friendship with some abandoned penguin. And I like animals. I like penguins.
That pulls on the heartstrings.
And I had the chance to see this movie early. So our review, if you check out our channel, reviewed it. I think it's good. I don't think it's like, an instant classic that you're going to want to watch every year with your family, but I think it is very almost like about as wholesome as you can get, and very sweet, and it's cute penguin and all that. On the other end of the spectrum,
something that's also cute and
speaking
cuddly.
of cuddly creatures, we also have the Xenomorph is back with Alien Romulus. So the kind of the new Alien franchise based on Ridley Scott. And I'll say I'm excited for this movie. I think the original Alien is one of my favorite movies.
It's one of the best.
It's to me, that's just the epitome of how you make a horror thriller creature movie.
Yeah.
So good. Since then, a bunch of sequels have not been as good. So I'm curious how this one will be. It looks more graphic and bloody and stuff than I typically like. So we'll see how that goes. The original, outside of the very shocking, famous scene of the alien coming out of the guy's chest, really all the other violence is implied and off screen, and it very much just plays on your fear rather than being isn't it gross? You see blood. So I'm hoping they don't go too far that way. But hey, I like Alien, so I will definitely excited for that. So check out my review when that drops. But the last segment of this podcast, speaking of things that I like and that we're sure that you will find enjoyment with as well, we have things we like that you should like too. So this is my week, and I thought, you know what? Sometimes I've been accused of being narrow-minded with my interests, that I don't branch out as much as maybe you have before, Sam. So I thought I would shake things up and share about metal. Good old German power metal, something I haven't talked about for at least a week. And share a band that if you have not checked them out, definitely worth checking out. It'll put some hair on your chest. This is Sabaton. So this is a German power metal band. One of the biggest bands in Europe. I don't know how much their popularity crosses over, but this, I'll admit off the start, the guy's voice is a bit of an acquired taste. It's a bit gruffer. But this is a very good workout music metal. They sing. It's not yelling metal, and every song of theirs is about war. These are a bunch of history nerds that moonlight as metalheads. So every song is about this battle in World War II or this character or this heroic soldier. And not only will it help you, pump out a few more push-ups in your workout, but it's also educational. This will teach you, about history. You don't even need a history college degree. Go listen to these guys. So have you ever checked out Sabaton?
Shockingly, I have not.
They haven't quite made your.
They haven't sort of bubbled up. They haven't been on my recommended playlist yet on Spotify, but maybe I'll
because I need to see these guys live. I haven't yet, but they'll bring these full on tanks on their stage, and it's all about everything's about war, and all the songs kind of sound the same, but it's a good
but who cares?
So we like it. So if you need something, if you're tired of all your old classical or whatever kind of music, and you just need a bit more metal.
Well, as someone who aspires to be an heptathlete in the 2028 Olympics, maybe I'll get some inspiration from this metal band. It'll get me across the finish line.
Some minutes off.
Have you heard of the modern heptathlon?
Is that all the 8 events?
It's you fence, you ride horses over obstacles, you run, you shoot guns, and you swim. How have I not heard of this before?
See, those just make me feel bad though, because I'm not good at any one of those things, and there's I know there's people out there that are good at all those things.
I know,
and it's
but what an epic event! And we actually watched it this year, so I'll get inspired by Sabaton and go out there and crush my records on.
So stay tuned for Sam taking LA by storm in the coming Summer Olympics. But hey, we are glad that you have joined us, whether you are on board with my German power metal or you're not yet on board. We're still glad that you have joined us for a conversation. Again, always a lot of stuff going on in culture, and I think it's just healthy as Christians to, step into it, not just, with our criticisms, but also just our questions, our conversations, even if we don't necessarily have the answers. Just, hey, be aware of what's going on and look for how God can lead us to step into that. So again, glad you have joined us, and we hope you will join us next week, every Thursday, for more conversations on faith and pop culture.